One night in June 2015, two female investigators were assigned to search for a missing person, but then they themselves vanished without a trace in the wilds of the Ozark forest 6 years later. They were finally found not at the bottom of a lake, not deep in the woods, but sitting silently, leaning on each other inside an airless, sealed-off mine shaft. The most haunting question wasn't how they died, but who sealed that door, leaving these brave women to slowly perish in the darkness with no one to hear their cries for help. This isn't a legend or some mountain folklore. This is the true story of two women who dedicated their lives to seeking justice, only to be swallowed by the silence of the night. And their first clue, the only thing that remained after 6 long years, was a rusted SUV, its hazard lights still blinking faintly like a final cry for help in the heart of the Ozark forest. Kendra Ellis and Simone Carter were both born in St. Louis, Missouri. In neighborhoods people avoided once the sun went down, they grew up in tough circumstances, nights spent trying to sleep through the sound of ambulance sirens, mornings sprinting to school to steer clear of trouble on the streets. But it was in that atmosphere of danger that they learned the value of life, of compassion, and a burning desire to change their community. Kendra had a gentle smile, but eyes that seemed to see right through everything, while Simone was strong, determined, always the first to rush into danger. They met at 16, volunteering together to teach kids how to read at a local shelter. From the first conversation, they recognized each other like two pieces of a puzzle meant to fit, sharing the same dream of becoming police officers to protect the very streets where they were raised. After graduation, they applied together to the Missouri State Police Academy, becoming two of the few black female cadets in their class. Throughout their training, they consistently ranked among the top performers, remembered by instructors for their relentless spirit. After earning their badges, they requested to be assigned to the same unit, working at the St. Louis Police Department, quickly becoming a trusted team among their colleagues. To them, being a police officer wasn't just a job, it was a calling. Even though they faced heartbreaking stories every day, they held on to their belief in goodness, convinced that their presence would make the streets safer for children and for mothers like their own. In early June 2015, a string of anonymous tips started coming into the hotline, reporting human trafficking activity. The caller described a truck appearing at night near the Ozark forest, carrying young women with terrified faces. They spoke of cries coming from inside the truck before it disappeared into the woods. Though there was no concrete evidence, the case immediately caught Kendra and Simone's attention. They knew traffickers often exploited the treacherous terrain of remote areas to hide, and police rarely had the resources to fully investigate such places. On June 13th, after nights of staking out the area and mapping possible routes, Kendra and Simone decided to head out themselves to the suspected stop of the mysterious truck. They didn't file an official report with their superiors, fearing the traffickers might have an inside source who could tip them off. It was a courageous choice, but also a fateful one. Before leaving, Kendra texted her mother, "I'll be home soon. I'll cook dinner for you tomorrow." Simone made a quick call to her little brother, reassuring him, "It'll be fine." No one realized those words would become their last. They drove the department SUV out of headquarters at 10 p.m., by heading south, leaving the city lights behind, venturing into the darkness of the dense Ozark woods, where the moon barely lit the narrow trail leading to the abandoned Briar Creek quarry. In the summer, the Ozark forest was thick with the scent of damp grass and the chorus of insects ringing through the night. Overgrown trees swallowed up dirt roads that had all but disappeared from official maps. Deep within the forest lay Briar Creek Quarry, the remnants of a mining company that went bankrupt in 1968. Since then, it had become a forgotten place, unpatrolled and lawless, visited only by the occasional scavenger searching for scrap metal. The quarry entrance was a horizontal shaft, carved into the rock face, its rusted steel gate blocking the way, welded shut long ago, completely sealing off the inside from the outside world. By day, sunlight barely filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the damp ground. By night, the place was swallowed by pitch-black darkness, with no lights, no cell phone signal, nothing. within a few miles of the quarry. There were only 2 old wooden houses, their elderly residents living reclusive lives, rarely interacting with anyone. The dirt road leading to the quarry was rutted and strewn with loose stones, flanked by towering oak and pine trees that loomed tens of meters overhead, making the area feel even more ominous and deserted. This was where Kendra and Simone arrived that night, driven by their determination to uncover the truth, never imagining it would become the nightmare that swallowed them both. For the next 6 years, no one would find even the slightest trace that they had ever been there. As Kendra and Simone drove their SUV deeper into the Ozark forest, the clock was nearing midnight. Overhead, a sliver of a crescent moon peeked through thick clouds, casting a faint, ghostly light over the narrow dirt trail. Barely wide enough for a single vehicle, the air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and now and then, the lonely cry of an owl drifted on the breeze, adding an eerie chill to the night. But for them, the greatest fear wasn't the darkness itself, it was the thought that somewhere out there, victims might be trapped, waiting desperately for someone to come save them. The SUV jolted to a stop when the front wheels sank into a deep pothole. Simone cursed under her breath, but then they both burst out laughing, easing the tension that had been building. They checked their guns, tested their flashlights, and exchanged one final look, their eyes silently promising they wouldn't leave each other's side. Simone switched off the engine and turned on the hazard lights, so the SUV would be easier to find in an emergency. They unfolded an old map, marked the vehicle's location, and plotted the shortest path on foot to the entrance of Briar Creek Quarry. About a mile away, from here, their police radios began to hiss with static, sometimes cutting out completely, making contact with headquarters nearly impossible. Still, they pressed on. The air grew thicker as they stepped away from the car, flashlight beams sweeping through the woods, catching glimpses of gnarled tree trunks and roots that jutted across the path like skeletal arms. Every crunch of dry leaves beneath their boots echoed unnaturally loud, heightening the sense of isolation in the vast, silent forest as they moved deeper into the woods. They realized the trail had been almost entirely reclaimed by nature. Bushes crowded the narrow path, thorns snagged on their uniforms, forcing them to slow down and scan their surroundings carefully. Occasionally, Kendra would pause to point out old tire tracks in the dirt, proof that a large vehicle had passed through recently. Each mark confirmed they were on the right track, but also sparked a creeping dread if traffickers had been here. They clearly knew the area well. Simone kept a wary eye on the treetops, worried someone might be lying in wait. They reached a sharp bend where the terrain began sloping downward, rocky cliffs rising on either side, and the path was split by a shallow creek bed as they crossed. A strange sound reached them, the metallic clink of something striking stone, echoing through the otherwise still night. They instantly switched off their flashlights, pressed against the rock face, and held their breath to listen. But after a few tense minutes, all they could hear was their own pounding hearts, swallowed by the suffocating silence. Still, their senses were on high alert. When they switched their lights back on, the beams landed on a rusted sign, swaying weakly in the breeze. Briar Creek Quarry, private property, no trespassing. This was the entrance to the quarry, the place they believed held the answers, behind the weeks of anonymous tips. The mouth of Briar Creek Quarry loomed like a gaping black maw in the damp gray rock. A rusted steel gate blocked the entrance, but strangely, one section of the bars had been cut away, leaving a gap just wide enough for a person to slip through. Kendra swept her flashlight around the area and spotted drag marks on the ground, as if something heavy had been pulled inside. Nearby, the wind flipped over a dusty handkerchief embroidered with the letter S. Simone frowned, picked it up, and tucked it into an evidence bag. They debated returning to the SUV to call for backup, but when they checked their radios, they found only a blinking red light, no signal. Kendra tried texting their team, but her phone showed no service. They decided to wait a few minutes at the entrance, weighing whether to retreat. But just then, Simone noticed a fresh boot print pressed into the thin layer of dust before the entrance, so crisp that even the tread pattern was intact. The footprint faced outward, but stopped abruptly a few steps away, as if the person had vanished into the woods. Their instincts told them they couldn't leave without knowing if someone needed help inside. Their flashlights probed the quarry's dark interior, revealing only an impenetrable blackness. A cold draft wafted out, carrying a faint, musty scent that felt almost like the breath of death. Simone stepped in first, Kendra right behind her, as they squeezed through the opening. A sudden, deafening clang erupted from behind the metal crashing, or a heavy door slamming shut. The sharp noise echoed deep inside the tunnel, sending a shiver down their spines. They spun around just in time to see darkness swallow the entrance. The gap they'd crawled through was now sealed by a slab of iron that had slammed down without warning. "Run," Kendra shouted, but their feet tangled on loose rocks, sending them sprawling forward in that fleeting moment. Simone's flashlight slipped from her grasp, skittering across the stone floor, its beam flickering wildly before dying completely. A gust of wind hissed through the narrow shaft, sounding like a long, mournful wail, mingling with their ragged breathing in the pitch-black darkness. They could only hear each other's strangled sobs as they realized they couldn't move their legs. Sharp pain radiated through their bodies from the fall. They had plunged into a hidden pit just beyond the steel bars. Rocks had shattered, bones had broken, and every attempt to rise brought a searing agony. Kendra reached out, found Simone's hand, and they clutched each other tightly. There was no more light, no more sound, except their own panicked hearts. And above them, the quarry entrance was now completely sealed by the slab of steel, cutting off any hope of ever seeing daylight again. 2 days after Kendra and Simone lost contact, the St. Louis Police Department began tracing the location signal of their SUV by the end of the second day. The search team discovered the vehicle parked along a dirt road, nearly a mile from the entrance to Briar Creek Quarry. The scene sent a chill down everyone's spine. The SUV was covered in a thin layer of dust, hazard lights still blinking faintly, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. The driver's seat was reclined, as if someone had left in a hurry. Inside, everything appeared almost untouched. An open local map lay on the passenger seat. A single spot circled in red ink, Briar Creek Quarry. The keys were still in the ignition. Simone's phone showed 30% battery, but had no calls made or received since they left headquarters. Their police radio sat on the back seat, its indicator light blinking red, signaling it had lost connection shortly after they exited the city. The back seat was tidy, with no signs of a struggle. What truly unsettled the search team was Kendra's pair of police boots, placed neatly beside the SUV's, tire tracks perfectly lined up, as if someone had set them there intentionally, beneath the boots. Clear footprints were stamped in the muddy ground, pointing directly toward the quarry entrance, but just a few steps in, the tracks abruptly vanished on the dry, hard-packed earth, leaving no further trail. Police immediately established a crime scene and cordoned off a 2-mile search radius, bringing in K9 units to pick up a scent. Yet the dogs quickly lost the trail near the quarry entrance, as if everything had simply stopped there, beyond that point. All they could detect was the damp, earthy scent of rotting leaves and moss. As news of the 2 missing investigators spread, theories began circulating. Some believed they had fallen into an ambush by human traffickers. Others suggested it was an accident, that they had gotten lost in the forest and disoriented, but every theory was undermined by the state of the SUV if they'd been attacked. Why were there no signs of a struggle, missing belongings, blood, or damage if they had chosen to disappear voluntarily? Why were the hazard lights left blinking for 2 days straight? Draining the battery, the vehicle's GPS recorded its final stop precisely at the trailhead leading to the quarry, indicating they had arrived and exited the SUV willingly. Some speculated they had staged their own disappearance, but no one could explain why 2 exemplary officers on the verge of promotion would abandon everything, their careers, their families together. Traffic cameras along the route from St. Louis to the Ozarks showed them driving calmly, with no suspicious vehicles tailing them or any signs of distress. The deeper investigators dug, the less sense the case made. All that was certain was the last known point they had reached the entrance to Briar Creek Quarry and then vanished without a trace. When the search team reached the quarry entrance, they found the steel gate blocking it had been welded shut with a fresh sheet of metal. The welds were dull but clearly recent, suggesting it had been done only days before. This discovery shocked everyone that steel plate hadn't been present in satellite images taken just a week earlier by the state's environmental monitoring team surveying the Ozark forest. That meant someone had come here within days, sealed the quarry entrance from inside or outside, and then disappeared. Yet there were no fresh tire tracks, no footprints near the entrance, only a few spots where the mud looked disturbed, but a recent night of heavy rain had washed away any clear evidence. They called into the quarry through narrow gaps between the steel bars, but only a cold, empty echo answered back. Gas detectors showed no abnormal or toxic fumes, and sensors picked up no movement or sounds inside. Still. One older officer muttered quietly, "It feels strange here, like there's an old smell, the kind you find in places best left undisturbed." There was no sign proving Kendra and Simone had entered the quarry, but no evidence either that they had ever left. After nearly a week of intensive searching, emergency meetings were held, yet the question haunting everyone remained unanswered: who had welded the quarry shut, and from which side, if welded from the outside. The culprit would have needed heavy equipment and power supplies, but somehow left no trace of movement. If from the inside, how had they escaped without a sign as public pressure on the St. Louis police mounted? Kendris and Simone's families grew exhausted with worry, while volunteer groups refused to give up, combing the Ozark forest for any clue. But all they found were random, unrelated scraps, rusted cans, old cable pieces, a few torn plastic sacks. Forensic teams analyzed the steel plate sealing the quarry and found weld patterns consistent with high-powered portable industrial welders typically used in construction or mining. Yet no evidence of a large truck or equipment moving through the area was found, nor did anyone in nearby towns report seeing vehicles or heavy machinery in the days leading up to the disappearance. A heavy silence fell over the investigation, as if the forest itself had swallowed every effort to uncover the truth. All anyone could do was wonder, did this place ever intend to give Kendra and Simone back to the world outside? In the summer of 2021, 6 years after Kendra and Simone vanished, two men, scrap hunters from a small town on the edge of the Ozark forest, drove an old pickup into the Briar Creek quarry area searching for scrap metal. They knew the place had once been a rich source of steel, but it had long been avoided due to chilling rumors of ghosts haunting the site. As they approached the quarry entrance, they found a massive steel plate sealed tightly across it, its surface rusted but thick and heavy. One of them let out a quiet curse. The plate alone would be worth a small fortune if they could cut it up for scrap, carrying a portable cutter and gas tanks. They began slicing through the steel under the blazing summer sun of the Ozarks. Sparks flew from the cutting torch, the shrieking sound of metal grinding echoing through the lonely woods, a sound that only made the atmosphere feel more oppressive. After nearly 2 hours of work, they finally created an opening large enough to squeeze through. When they shone their flashlights inside, a wave of cold, moldy air gusted out, like the stale breath of the earth after years of being sealed shut. The darkness beyond was thick and absolute. They stepped inside, each footstep ringing sharply on the stone floor, shattering the suffocating stillness. But only a few meters in, they froze. Their beams swept across two figures sitting motionless against the stone wall, their uniforms rotted, but unmistakably those of police officers. The bodies sat slumped together, heads bowed, hands nearly touching. This wasn't a trick of the light, nor animal remains. These were human bodies, preserved unnervingly well in the quarry's cold, dry air, shocked and terrified. The two men fled the quarry, driving nearly 5 miles back to the main road before they found cell service and dialed 911. When forensics and investigators arrived, they were met with a haunting, frozen tableau inside the quarry. Kendra and Simone were seated close together, their posture nearly the same as if they had been alive. Heads tilted forward, uniforms still faintly bearing the dark blue of their police issue, but shredded and decayed in places. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no clues pointing to a direct attack. Near their feet, investigators discovered a weathered leather-bound notebook, its cover rotting, but the pages inside still bearing shaky, desperate handwriting, smeared in places as if by sweat or tears. The notebook's final line sent chills down every spine. "We can't hear anyone coming. We only hear metal clanging above us." Then the light goes out completely. Earlier entries repeated the same hopeless pleas: "We're trapped. Can't crawl, legs. Hurt so bad. Holding hands, someone is out there." Preliminary analysis showed both women suffered multiple fractures to their legs, likely from a fall, and gradually lost consciousness due to shock and dehydration in the stifling air of the mine. Silence reigned as investigators realized everything had been perfectly sealed, aside from the notebook and the two lifeless bodies. There was nothing else, no supplies, no signs of survival. Forensic analysis of the steel plate the scrap hunters had cut through revealed uniform, solid welds consistent with industrial-grade portable welding equipment. More disturbingly, the welds clearly indicated they had been made from inside the quarry, not outside, as originally believed. This horrifying detail raised the chilling question: if Kendra and Simone had fallen and been incapacitated inside the mine, then who had been left behind to weld the entrance shut from within and then vanish without a trace? Investigators scoured records on Briar Creek Quarry's geology and history, unearthing a strange fact. There was an old ventilation shaft leading into the woods nearly 2 kilometers from the main entrance, once used by the mining company, now mostly collapsed and known to very few. The original blueprints of the mine had long been lost, and no one could confirm whether the vent was still passable. Meanwhile, no welding equipment, gas tanks, cables, or tracks of any heavy machinery were found in or around the quarry. It was as if the work had been done with surgical precision and then erased from existence. The discovery of the 2 missing investigators immediately shocked the public, sending waves of outrage through the St. Louis Police Department and Missouri state officials. Demands for answers poured in. How could no one have known for 6 years that the quarry had been sealed so deliberately? Who had the knowledge of the terrain, the resources, and the cold-heartedness to leave 2 injured women to die alone in the dark? A wide-ranging review of land leases, mining rights, and any illegal activity near the quarry was launched at the same time. Locals began to share stories of a reclusive man seen driving an old truck into the woods late at night or appearing near abandoned mines. Some veteran scrap hunters said they'd glimpsed him hauling welding gear, but no one knew his identity. Police eventually uncovered records of a mysterious man who had leased land near Briar Creek since the 1990s, ostensibly for mineral research. Though there wasn't enough evidence to press charges, the revelation sent shivers down everyone's spine. Could this man have stumbled on the injured investigators, then sealed the quarry to avoid exposure of his illegal activities? What once seemed like a mysterious missing persons case had now taken on a horrifying new dimension, as every clue pointed to a deliberate human hand, someone who turned 2 dedicated investigators into forgotten ghosts buried in the heart of the mountain. As the investigation shifted toward a suspected homicide, the families of Kendra and Simone felt like their world was collapsing all over again. They had once held on to the hope that their daughters might have died quickly in an accident or at the hands of a captor, but now, the truth emerged slowly and agonizingly. The women may have been alive for days, trapped in darkness, desperately waiting for rescue, only for someone to deliberately seal their only way out. The press descended in a frenzy, running headlines about a cover-up in the quarry and fueling public speculation. Some locals suspected the authorities were hiding something, while others feared a murderer still lurked in the woods. The St. Louis Police Department was under immense pressure, with commanders grilled about why they hadn't deployed helicopters for an exhaustive search immediately after finding the SUV. The already fragile trust between the community and those sworn to protect them began to crack. Everyone wanted to know, how was it possible no one heard Kendra's and Simone's cries in those crucial early days? When they might still have been alive, several volunteer search groups insisted they had combed the area around the quarry entrance, yet heard or saw nothing. That deadly silence became a black hole, swallowing every last glimmer of hope. During memorial vigils, the victims' families clung to one another, sobbing uncontrollably as they realized there might always be parts of the truth that would never be spoken aloud. The final autopsy results only deepened the mystery. Although both women had multiple fractures in their legs, there were no signs they had been tied up, beaten, or shot. All injuries were confined to the lower limbs, consistent with falling from a height. Medical examiners concluded they likely survived for 2 to 3 days after the fall, long enough to write in the notebook. To hope, and then to despair. From the last scrawled lines. Criminal psychologists deduced the victims were fully aware someone was nearby at the quarry entrance, someone who sealed them in. The most chilling possibility was that Kendra and Simone heard the sound of metal above them just before the final light was snuffed out, meaning the moment the steel plate was welded shut was not silent. And whoever did it knew they were still alive. Every scenario of an accidental sealing became impossible to believe. No one would lug industrial welding equipment deep into the forest just to close off an abandoned mine, unless the goal was to silence someone permanently. Each new revelation only deepened the fear and confusion, sparking rumors about a hunter of humans hiding in the woods, or a secret criminal network operating unseen for years. When police reviewed old land lease records around the quarry, they found a 1994 contract granting a man named Luther Boyd a long-term lease on the area for geological surveying. Despite Boyd having no engineering license or mining company affiliation, now nearly 70, Boyd lived alone in a wooden cabin just over 10 miles from Briar Creek. His old medical records showed he had once been treated for mild paranoid delusions when police raided his cabin. They discovered a storage room containing old welding equipment, gas tanks, cables, and a detailed blueprint of the Briar Creek Quarry's tunnels, including a ventilation shaft leading nearly 2 kilometers from the main entrance into the forest. But the most maddening twist came when investigators checked motion-activated wildlife cameras installed around the forest by the state's conservation agency over the past decade. Not a single frame showed Luther anywhere near the quarry on the night Kendra and Simone disappeared, nor was there any footage of a large vehicle carrying welding gear. Even more bizarre, forensic tests on the steel plate and welds found no fingerprints, not even Luther's, and police DNA databases showed no matches with any unknown profiles left at the scene. This left investigators facing a terrifying possibility. Everything suggested someone who knew the quarry intimately, someone careful enough to leave no trace, and someone who could have already been inside the mine, welding the entrance shut from within before escaping through a little-known ventilation shaft. But the identity of that person remained a gaping, haunting void. The unresolved questions and the realization the perpetrator could still be alive, somewhere in the vast, shadowy reaches of the Ozark Mountains, left the community in a state of prolonged fear, trust shattered, and a chilling sense that the forest itself might be hiding a dark secret that would never be fully uncovered. After the bodies of Kendra and Simone were found, a joint funeral was held for the 2 detectives at the small church just outside St. Louis, the same place where they had attended services with their mothers as little girls. Hundreds gathered, people from communities around the city, old friends and colleagues, and even Ozark locals who had never met them but came to light candles in their honor. In the hushed atmosphere, the mournful sound of brass horns filled the air as 2 coffins were carried side by side from the church. Many knelt, not only in sorrow but in guilt, each wondering if they could have done something to prevent this tragedy. During the service, Simone's mother sobbed through her words. She always believed justice would prevail, but justice didn't come in time for her. Her voice echoed through the hall, etching the pain not just into the hearts of 2 families, but into the conscience of an entire community, witnessing how 2 brave women had been forgotten in the very mission meant to protect others. In that space, many young officers pledged to carry on Kendra's and Simone's work, vowing no victim would be left alone in the dark again. But despite the sincerity of those promises, everyone knew it would be a long time before the community's fear and mistrust would begin to fade. The lack of a clear suspect spurred victims' rights organizations to demand improvements in search and rescue systems, especially for remote areas like the Ozark wilderness. Experts noted the critical window for saving missing persons rarely extends beyond the first 72 hours, yet delays caused by limited resources, lack of equipment, and the area's treacherous terrain let Kendra and Simone's chance slip away forever. The silence of those who might have seen or heard something, even unwittingly, had also contributed to a deadly gap. Dozens of community workshops were organized to teach people how to recognize suspicious signs, report emergencies quickly, and protect themselves, along with raising funds to support families of the missing. But alongside these efforts, one question hung unanswered: who welded the mine shut? Was it a lone killer, or a criminal network ready to silence anyone who stumbled upon their secrets? That terrifying ambiguity turned the story into a grim warning. The Ozark wilderness is just wild nature. There are dark corners where human laws hold no power. The case was officially closed with the final ruling: unintentional accident resulting in death by trauma and exhaustion. Yet the families and many locals still believed someone deliberately killed Kendra and Simone by sealing them alive in the mine. Without clear evidence to press charges, the investigation was archived over a year after the bodies were recovered. Since then, Briar Creek Quarry has become a somber pilgrimage site for those wishing to honor the two detectives. A stone memorial now stands at the entrance, engraved with the words, "They kept searching for others, until no one searched for them." On quiet nights, locals claim they still hear footsteps echoing from the woods or see faint pinpricks of light bobbing through the darkness, like flashlights moving silently among the trees. Though no one can prove it, the legend of two steadfast spirits wandering in search of justice for themselves lives on, a haunting reminder that lingers. And as the screen fades to black at the end of this story, a quiet question remains: what do you think really happened to Detectives Kendra and Simone that night? Share your thoughts below. Comment "Justice" for KNS if you believe justice still owes them an answer.